I never thought I'd be crying in the guest bathroom on the day of my own bridal shower. It wasn't because the dress didn't fit or that the caterer had forgotten the gluten-free cupcakes I'd specifically asked for. It wasn't even the normal bride-to-be nerves. No, it was because of her. My mother-in-law. Or rather, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. It started like a dream. I had everything arranged with such careful attention. Blush pink roses cascading down the fireplace, a photo wall filled with Polaroids of me and my fiancé since we met, and a mimosa bar my sister put together with glittery pink sugar on the rims of each glass. Every detail spoke of love.
Of joy.
Of a future I was finally allowing myself to believe in. But even perfection can't keep darkness at bay. She arrived 45 minutes late, clacking in with those sharp, too tall heels like she owned the place. The room paused for half a second, not out of respect, but because she always made everything about her. She didn't apologize for being late. She didn't smile. She scanned the room like a queen surveying her court, her eyes finally landing on me. And she smirked. Something in me tightened. She approached with arms outstretched, but there was nothing warm about the gesture. "Oh, darling," she said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You look brave, wearing white. Bold choice." The room laughed nervously. I did too.
Fake.
Awkward.
Shaky.
Was it a joke? A dig? A coded attack? I didn't even know anymore. She always played in that gray zone, never crossing a line but dancing on the edge of it with high-heeled precision. I brushed it off. Or at least I tried. But that was just the beginning. As the game started and everyone was seated, she took the liberty of standing, interrupting my best friend's speech, to clink her glass and say, "I hope everyone knows how much I sacrificed for this wedding to happen." Sacrificed? She hadn't paid a dime. She hadn't even offered to help plan. She wasn't invited to any of the bridal boutique visits, not because I excluded her, but because she kept saying she was too busy and that I had odd taste in gowns anyway. I clenched my fists under the table. I tried to stay calm, tried to focus on the faces of my friends and family, people who loved me, who were here to celebrate me. But she wouldn't stop. She kept interrupting. She critiqued the food, commented on the playlist. And then she opened a gift meant for me. I'd barely reached for the beautifully wrapped box from my cousin when she snatched it with one manicured hand and laughed. "Oh, I bet this is lingerie. Let's see what my future daughter-in-law will be wearing for my son." My stomach flipped. People chuckled again, but not because it was funny. It was uncomfortable. It was invasive. It was humiliating. I grabbed the box back, hands shaking. "Actually, this one's private," I said with the most grace I could summon. But she leaned in, whispering in my ear, "Don't be so sensitive. If you're going to be part of our family, you'll need thicker skin." That's when I excused myself. And that's how I ended up in the bathroom, heart pounding, makeup smudging at the corners of my eyes. I stared at myself in the mirror. What kind of future was I walking into? Was this just the start? Would this be my life? Always one-upped, always humiliated, always shrinking to fit the narrative she wrote for me?
I knew something had to change.
Right there, in that tiny lavender-scented bathroom, with the hum of laughter and party chatter muffled through the door, I made a quiet vow. She had made a scene.
Now it was my turn.
But I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't lash out.
No.
I would be calm.
Strategic.
And unforgettable. Because this day was mine, and if she thought she could ruin it, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I took a few slow breaths in that bathroom, fixed my eyeliner with a tissue, and straightened my shoulders. I wasn't going to let her win, not today. When I stepped out, the room was still buzzing, but I noticed something instantly. She was holding court. Surrounded by a few of my fiancé's aunts and some of her church friends, she was in full performance mode. "I just don't want him to wake up one day and realize he could have done better," she was saying. "You know how boys are, too eager to settle down. And she's nice, I suppose, just very modern." My jaw clenched. Did she just question his decision to marry me? She knew exactly what she was doing. Loud enough for people to hear. Quiet enough for it to still be considered, just expressing concern. I walked past them with a smile and grabbed a mimosa. I needed something to hold in my hand, something to keep me grounded. My sister caught my eye. She was fuming. She mouthed, "Do you want me to say something?" I shook my head. Not yet. The guests returned to their seats as we transitioned into the memory circle, a game where everyone shared a memory they had of me.
Sweet. Thoughtful. But not when she was involved.
One by one, my friends shared little stories, how we met, funny college nights, kind things I'd done for them. The energy was warm again. I felt the love surrounding me like a shield. Then came her turn. "Oh," she said with a sigh, as if it were a burden to speak. Well, I remember the first time I met her. She showed up in this jumpsuit. At a family dinner. In front of the pastor. A few gasps. A few confused glances. I froze. It wasn't a jumpsuit. It was a formal one-piece with a blazer. Tasteful.
Polished.
And I knew it had made a good impression. Everyone had said so. But she twisted the memory. Rewrote it. I remember thinking, she continued, "This girl is confident. Almost too confident. Too confident. What does that even mean?" She was painting me as someone arrogant, disrespectful, attention-seeking. And yet, everyone smiled awkwardly and sipped their drinks. No one wanted to challenge her. Not directly. That's how she operated. Just subtle enough to avoid confrontation, but sharp enough to draw blood. I looked to my fiancé's cousin, Rachel, across the room. Her eyes narrowed. She heard it too. She didn't say anything, but that one small nod told me everything. I wasn't imagining it. After the circle ended, I stepped outside for air. And that's when I heard her. Not to me, of course not, but on the phone. "She's nice, but she's not us," she whispered. "I mean, I'll support the marriage, but I just don't know how long it'll last." I felt like I'd been slapped. Not us. What did that even mean? Not traditional enough? Not religious enough? Not rich enough? Or was it just not obedient enough? Not the type to bite my tongue and play the perfect little doll in her puppet theater? She had no idea I was just around the corner listening. My blood boiled. And yet, I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. I let her show her true self to whoever was on the other end of the line. When she turned the corner and saw me standing there, her face froze. Only for a second. Then she smiled, sugary sweet.
"Oh.
Just checking in with my neighbor. Her cat's been sick, poor thing." I stared at her, wordless. She patted my arm. "You okay, darling? You look pale." "I'm fine," I replied. "Just needed a breath of fresh air." She leaned in close again. "Don't let your emotions get the best of you today. You wouldn't want people to think you're unstable." Unstable? I watched her walk away, her back straight, her smirk barely concealed. That was her plan all along, to push me, needle me, chip away at me until I cracked. But she was wrong. Because I wasn't going to break. I was going to build. I texted my sister. "Get the mic ready. I'm giving a speech before dessert." Because if she wanted attention, I'd give her some. Just not the kind she wanted. The dinner was set. Dessert was placed on the table. The clinking of glasses and soft chatter filled the air, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I could feel her watching me. It was like her gaze was a weight, pressing down on my shoulders, suffocating me little by little. I took a deep breath, standing to make my way to the mic. The moment I stepped to the front, the room went quiet. Everyone knew I wasn't one to get up and speak at family events, so this was rare. And I could feel the tension rise as I looked across the room, my eyes scanning faces, and finally resting on her. She was pretending to be so interested in the flowers on the table, but I could see the way her lips tightened. She had no idea what was coming. I adjusted the mic, cleared my throat, and started, my voice steady but calm. "Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I'm so grateful for the love and support you've all shown. But there's something I need to say. Something that's been weighing on me for far too long." The room held its breath. I could already feel her discomfort, her shifting in her seat. She wasn't sure what I was about to do, but she could tell it was coming. And she wasn't ready. "I know we're here to celebrate love, unity, and family. I continued, but I've learned something tonight that I need to address. There are those among us who, whether intentionally or not, try to undermine the happiness of others. And it's important to acknowledge that we don't always know what's really going on behind the scenes. I paused. My hands were shaking, but I didn't let the nerves show. She was on the edge of her seat now, leaning forward, her eyes narrowing as she realized I was speaking directly to her. You see, some people pretend to be your biggest supporter while subtly working behind the scenes to tear you down. Some people say one thing to your face, but behind your back, they tell others that you'll never be good enough. And I think it's time we acknowledge this kind of behavior and stop pretending it's acceptable. Her expression faltered. Her lips parted slightly, a flicker of guilt or panic in her eyes. But she still tried to keep the composure. Her hand rested on the table, but I noticed her fingers twitching. I've heard enough, I said, the words sharper now, cutting through the tension in the air. I've heard enough of the gossip, the backhanded comments, the attempts to make me feel small. I'm done with it, and I think you all deserve to know what's really going on. Her face drained of color, but she didn't move. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. I took a deep breath and turned slightly toward her, my voice lowering but ringing clear. You see, earlier, I overheard something that gave me all the answers I needed. My future mother-in-law, the woman who's supposed to welcome me into her family with open arms, instead told a friend on the phone that I wasn't right for him. That he could have done better. The room was dead silent. I could feel the weight of the words landing like a slap. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, others looked between us, but everyone could feel the tension crackling in the air. The truth had been exposed. There was no going back. I turned back to the mic, eyes still locked on hers. She said I wasn't right for him, that I was too modern, too confident, that I'd never fit in. But I stand here today, knowing exactly who I am, and I'm proud of that. So, if you have a problem with me, you can take it up with me directly. The room was still. My fiancé's cousin, Rachel, let out a low whistle. I could feel the entire room holding its breath, waiting for the fallout. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Her jaw clenched. She stood abruptly, causing the chair to scrape loudly against the floor. But she didn't leave. Instead, she glared at me with a fiery intensity, the mask slipping for just a moment. I can't believe you do this, she said through gritted teeth. This is supposed to be your day, and yet you're making it all about you. If you think I'm the problem here, then maybe it's you, who doesn't belong. I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. I didn't make this about me. You did. The guests were watching, and for the first time, it felt like they were actually seeing it, the subtle manipulations, the underhanded remarks, the emotional games she played. The truth was out in the open, and she knew it. Her eyes flicked around the room, realizing that the others weren't going to come to her defense.
She was on her own now.
The facade she'd so carefully crafted was starting to crumble. I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on her as she hesitated, the mask of polite composure slipping further. Finally, she swallowed hard and looked at me one last time. You'll regret this. But I didn't flinch. I already regret not saying something sooner. The moment felt heavy with finality, and before she could respond, I turned away. The guests began murmuring, but I was done. The veil was lifted, and I had said my piece. I felt lighter now. The truth, no matter how ugly, had been exposed. And nothing would ever be the same again. The seconds after the confrontation felt like an eternity. I stood there, hands shaking, my heart racing in my chest. The atmosphere in the room was thick with disbelief. The guests exchanged glances, their faces torn between confusion, shock, and curiosity. But one thing was undeniable. The mask had been ripped off. My mother-in-law's carefully constructed image had shattered. And with that, the silence became unbearable. She hadn't left. She wasn't going to give me the satisfaction of watching her crumble. Instead, she stood there, her hands clenched at her sides, her back straight as if bracing for something, anything. But her eyes? Those eyes were filled with something far darker. Fury, humiliation, and maybe even regret. She wasn't used to being called out like this, especially not in front of everyone. I could feel her glare, even though I wasn't looking directly at her anymore. It burned into the back of my neck, urging me to turn around. But I refused. I wasn't going to back down now. The murmurs around the room started to die down. My fiancé, Mark, had stood up at some point but was frozen in place, unsure of how to handle what was unfolding. His expression was a mixture of disbelief and hurt, but mostly confusion. He didn't know how to process what had just happened. I could feel his eyes on me, but I didn't dare look at him. Not yet. I needed a moment. I needed space to breathe. I could hear my mother-in-law's breath, sharp and heavy, as she slowly took a step forward, but not toward me. She turned to Mark, her voice cutting through the tension. "You let her do this to me?" she spat, her words venomous and dripping with contempt. "You just let her ruin everything?" Mark flinched, his face pale as he took a step back. He was caught between us, unable to pick a side. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between the woman who had raised him and the woman he was about to marry. It was like watching someone unravel before your eyes. The tension was thick enough to choke. "I didn't know this was happening," Mark muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know she was going to do this." "You didn't know?" My mother-in-law's laugh was cold, harsh. "Of course you didn't. But she knew exactly what she was doing. She's always been this way, hasn't she? Always trying to be the center of attention. Always wanting to make everything about herself." Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Instead, I stood my ground, feeling a wave of strength wash over me. I had taken control, and I wasn't about to let her take it back. "Enough," I said, my voice steady, even as the anger simmered beneath the surface. "You want to talk about me being selfish? You've been doing this for years. I've had enough of your passive-aggressive remarks, your little jabs. You've tried to manipulate everyone, and I'm done being your target. You can't keep doing this." Her eyes narrowed dangerously, and for a moment, I saw a flash of vulnerability in them. Something raw, something real. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a bitter sneer. "You think you know me?" she sneered, taking another step forward. "You think you have me all figured out? I've been playing this game for far longer than you've even realized." And just like that, the final barrier between us was gone. The true nature of the woman I had been trying to appease for months, the woman who had pretended to be sweet, loving, and kind, was now fully exposed. I took a deep breath, my body trembling from the adrenaline. The confrontation I had been dreading for so long had finally come to a head. But there was no turning back now. There was no going back to pretending everything was fine. The truth had been laid bare for everyone to see. Mark stepped forward, his voice strained. "Mom, stop. This isn't the time or place for this. We're here to celebrate. Can't you see what you're doing to her?" But my mother-in-law wasn't listening anymore. Her eyes were locked on me, her expression cold and calculated. "You're just like the others, aren't you?" she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Always pretending to be perfect, always acting like you've got everything under control. But you don't. You're just like the rest of them. Weak." The word hit me harder than I expected. Weak. I wasn't weak. I had fought for this moment. I had fought for my happiness, for my dignity. And she wasn't going to take that away from me. Not now, not ever. I took a step toward her, my chin lifted defiantly. "No, I'm not weak. But you are. You've spent your whole life hiding behind a mask, manipulating people into doing what you want. And I'm done with it." She stepped back, her face flushed with fury. The others in the room were watching now, some with pity, others with confusion. But one thing was clear. The game was over. My mother-in-law had been exposed for who she truly was, and there was no hiding it anymore. She took another step back, but this time, she didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The silence in the room spoke volumes. She knew she had lost. She knew that no matter how much she tried to manipulate the situation, the truth was out. I turned to Mark, my heart pounding in my chest. His eyes were wide, his face pale, but there was something else there now, something new. He wasn't sure what to think, but I could see the realization in his eyes. He wasn't as naive as he had been before. He had witnessed the toxicity of his mother firsthand. "I'm sorry," he whispered, reaching out for my hand. I didn't hesitate. I took his hand, squeezing it tight. "It's not your fault," I said quietly. "But it's time we both move on from this." From her. I didn't know what would happen after this moment, but I knew one thing for sure. My relationship with her would never be the same. And that was okay. The aftermath of that moment was everything I expected and more. It was as if the world had shifted beneath my feet, and I was left standing in the middle of a storm, watching the wreckage around me. The bridal shower, which had been meant to celebrate love and unity, had turned into a battlefield. Guests shuffled uneasily, trying to figure out what to say, how to act. No one knew where to look or what to do next. They were all just as caught up in the whirlwind as I was. Mark and I left the event shortly after, his arm wrapped around me protectively. But even though he was physically close, there was a distance between us now, an invisible wall that neither of us knew how to break. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did. But everything had changed in that moment, and I wasn't sure how to navigate the world that had just exploded in my face. We didn't speak much on the drive home. The silence between us was suffocating, thick with unspoken words and unanswered questions. His eyes flickered to me occasionally, but I could see the hesitation in his gaze. He didn't know how to fix this, how to make it better. And I didn't know how to tell him that maybe there was no fixing it. When we arrived at our apartment, I sank into the couch, staring blankly at the walls. I wanted to forget. I wanted to erase what had happened, to pretend that nothing had ever gone wrong. But I couldn't. The words, the confrontation, the look in her eyes, they were all etched into my memory now. There was no going back to the naive, blissful state I had been in before. Mark stood in the doorway, his hands hanging at his sides. He wasn't sure what to say. I could feel the weight of his confusion pressing down on him. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly, his voice full of concern. I looked up at him, my chest tightening with emotion. "I don't know if I'll ever be okay after this," I admitted. The words felt like a confession. I don't know if I can ever go back to pretending that everything was fine, that she was just the overbearing mother-in-law who meant well. Mark took a step toward me, his expression softening. "You don't have to pretend anymore. I'm here for you." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that this would all blow over, that we would move past it and find a way to rebuild our relationship. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. What happened today had exposed something deep and unresolved, something that couldn't just be swept under the rug. As I sat there, trying to make sense of everything, my phone buzzed. A message notification popped up, and my heart skipped a beat. It was from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. The message read, "You thought you won today, but you haven't seen the last of me. I'll make sure you regret this." I froze. My blood ran cold as I read the words again. There was no mistaking it. The message was from my mother-in-law. She had already begun her retaliation. I turned to Mark, my hands trembling as I showed him the screen. His face went pale as he read the message. "What does she mean by this?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't think she's done yet. This isn't over." Mark sat down beside me, his mind racing as he processed what was happening. "I can't believe she would do this. After everything, after what she said, I thought we were finally getting somewhere. But now I don't know what to think." I felt a wave of frustration and anger wash over me. My mother-in-law had always been a force to be reckoned with, but now it was like she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I had done my best to stand up to her today, to expose her manipulation for what it was. But now, it felt like I had opened a door I couldn't close. "I don't know what she's going to do next," I said, my voice shaky but determined. "But I won't let her control me anymore. I won't let her tear us apart." Mark reached out, taking my hand in his grip firm but comforting. "We'll figure this out together. She can't break us if we don't let her." For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, We could face whatever she had planned together. But then, as the seconds ticked by, a lingering sense of dread gnawed at my insides. I knew my mother-in-law wasn't one to back down easily. She was a master manipulator, and if she was truly vowing revenge, I didn't know what she was capable of. As I sat there, the message still staring back at me on my phone screen, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. I had no idea what she was planning, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was about to change in ways I couldn't even begin to imagine. The final twist was coming, and I was bracing myself for whatever it would be.